All right, ladies and gentlemen, we have a special one here today. I am joined by Joshua Medcalf. Many of you know him from his work, Chop Wood, Carry Water, and the other books that he's read. And this is going to be awesome. I can just feel it. I can feel it. Joshua, how you doing today, man?
I'm so good, buddy. Great to see you again. Great to be on here with you.
Awesome, man. Awesome. Hey, so real quick, talk to us real quick about, for those who are watching this podcast, talk to us about your background there, man.
Whew.
That's a profound piece of art, man.
This background. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So I'll actually read something that I kind of wrote about this that had been kind of on my heart lately, and I kind of had this vision to create something like this. So it's a Basquiat wallpaper, and then I wrote what I wrote, which is make shit on top of it. Originally, I think you can kind of see in this corner, that was, I used to make those as a kid, and growing up in Tulsa, Oklahoma, a lot of people told me that's not art, and that's just scribbles. And now today I see stuff just like that sells for tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars. Mm-hmm. And so I was kind of stuck in a place where some people maybe didn't understand art, or they didn't understand the future of art, or they were kind of small-minded. And so, I wrote this. As we become adults, we sink deeper and deeper into a prism of perfectionism. We believe the lie that we aren't artists, that only the chosen few can create, that something has to be perfect, that we have to color inside the lines, that we have to accept what is offered, and that we can't make anything better. I love the phrase make shit, because it gives me permission to make things that suck, because if I make enough shitty things, eventually I'll get better and make something awesome. It's wild to me that even though I sell almost $1 million of art every year, I still have trouble believing I'm a real artist. I loved making art as a kid, but I couldn't draw traditionally, so I developed this deep belief that I wasn't an artist. Every kid believes that they are an artist, and they are, because they make shit all the time, often at the disgust and frustration of the adults. The way to ensure that you never make anything awesome is to never make anything at all. My most famous piece of art, Chop Wood, Carry Water, is far from my best work, but my job isn't to be judge and jury on my own work. My job is to do the work. My job is to make shit and hit publish. It's your job as well, but no one hires you for this job. You have to choose to get in the arena. There's a seat in the locker room, a jersey with your name on it, but you have to be courageous enough to choose yourself, get in the arena, and do the work. In a world full of critics, be a creator. We get one life, one at bat. Make it count.
Wow, man.
So that's the ethos behind that.
Wow, that is powerful. You know what, man? I'm not gonna lie. I was a little convicted as you were reading that, because our kids, man, they make stuff all the time. You know what I'm saying? You probably have little family members, nieces, nephews. Yep. They make stuff all the time, and it's just like, what is this?
Yeah, exactly.
But they put their heart into it. It's like the greatest thing, man. I love that. I love that, man. I think that's very powerful. Is this something that has been welling up in you for years? Is this something that it's a recent revelation? Because when you start talking about, the man in the arena, the woman in the arena, that's where it is. Many people have heard that. I think it's Theodore Roosevelt quote. Brene Brown, I believe, repopularized it again.
Yep, and very greatly. Yeah.
Yeah. So I want you to just, is this a new development in your personal life, or is this something that's been welling up for a long time?
I think it's something that's been welling up for a long time. I've had that desire to make stuff. I believe that I am an artist, but there was this long period of time where that was really, really challenging, because until you kind of break out, it's tough with art. Sports, there's this really kind of linear trajectory of, like, you start out whenever you're young, you play games, there's a lot of context and structure. Mm-hmm. And art, that usually isn't the case. And so oftentimes, whether it's a rapper, or whether it's somebody that draws, or somebody that builds stuff, or somebody that writes stuff, you kind of hear the same story a lot, that in the beginning, most people told them, hey man, that sucks. You should put this away. This is ridiculous. And there's a guy named Sir Ken Robinson that kind of put out a book that talks about the research where, up until about 7 years old, if you ask kids in a classroom, how many of you believe that you're artists, every single kid's hand shoots up. And then by the time they get to about 5th or 6th grade, they ask that same question and only 1 or 2 kids will put their hands up. And usually that's because somewhere along the line, somebody came in and they offered them something that they had made, and somebody comes along, and like you're like, look what I did, look what I made, look at this, and then somebody that you respect comes along and just goes boom, and says that's terrible, you suck, and then that internalizes, and then all of a sudden we stop creating, and we start to believe this lie that our job is to consume, our job is to just be a cog in the wheel, and it's not to live out the life that God actually created us to live and to be.
That's powerful. That's powerful. You alluded to it earlier, and I'm going to just read. This is your Twitter handle, and I think it's powerful because you said, hey, my job is to create the work and hit publish.
Yeah.
That's my job.
Yeah.
And I want to talk about the elephant in the room, chop wood, carry water. You have famously stated that I wrote 7 books. Chop wood is my least favorite, so naturally it's the one that's the best selling. It's one of the ones that's the best selling books in the world, right? This book that you've created, this tremendous book, and if the listeners out there today, if you have not read this book, I highly recommend that you go and purchase it. I have actually had to, I don't know whether I had to reach out to you or Amazon. There was a point where this thing was sold out, dude. I had athletes, yo, Joe, I need one of those books, and it's become one of your famous works. Athletes worldwide have read it. Parents worldwide have read this book, and it's your least favorite book. I actually have a player right now in Japan who has my copy. He goes, hey, Joe. He was like, yo, Joe. I said, what? He goes, hey, I got that book you gave me. And I'm like, yo. And he's showing me the notes, dude, and the highlights. And I'm like, man, you got to be kidding me. So kudos to you, My question to you is, with this trajectory of, like, create, let the world judge it, you probably didn't know that this book was going to be the one. Talk to us about your relationship with that book and why it's not your favorite. I got to hear this, man.
Yeah, I have a very interesting relationship with Chop Wood, Carry Water. I don't know that it's necessarily my least favorite. I put that on there because a lot of times I get people that will send me a direct message or some sort of a message on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, whatever it is, or send me a text because my number is in the back of a lot of the books, and they'll say, man, I read your book and I loved it. And I'm like, I've written a lot of books. And so it is an awesome book. It did kind of what I wanted it to do. Originally, why I wrote that book was because IMG Academy had reached out to me and asked me to head up mental conditioning and leadership. And if I had taken that position, I would have been an employee, and anything that I created would have been their work product. It wouldn't have been my intellectual property, it would have been theirs. And so I didn't leave bed for about 6 weeks, and I just wrote. And I don't want to dramatize that. I would get up occasionally for food. I would use the restroom, but that's basically it. I was basically in bed for about 23 hours a day writing on my phone. I write books on my phone. I can't write on a computer. I'll edit on a computer sometimes, but most of the way that I write is in notes on my phone. And so I wrote for 6 weeks, and that became the first edition of Chop Wood, Carry Water. Then there's, it's now, I think, on the 5th edition. I've molded it and shaped it over a couple of years. But yeah, so the reason why I wrote that book, and then I wrote Hustle right after that, which is my kind of entrepreneurial journey and a lot of my life journey. And I had wrote Chop Wood Carry Water because as I looked around the field of sports psychology, mental training, there was no consensus go-to book. So, if you played baseball, you had Mind Gym, which, connects with a lot of those guys. There were, the inner game of tennis, the inner game of golf, but there was no book that if you asked sports psychologists or people in mental training that they would say, there's this one book you gotta read. Yeah. And so I kind of took that upon my shoulders as like, I'm going to try and write the go-to book in sports psychology. Originally, it was called Start Here, Mental Training Finally Made Simple. It had a 45-page fable that was Chop Wood Carry Water. Inside of that, I sent it to John Gordon. He said, man, throw the rest of this stuff out, build out that fable. That fable is what it is. That fable is supposed to be the book. And I was like, man, I don't write fables. You write fables. I write, traditional books. And then he just kept beating on me. And finally I did that, and then once I started sharing it with people, I had a feeling that it was going to be pretty special because the reaction to it was very intense. And it's not that I don't love the book, it's that Chop Wood Carry Water is the starting point. It's not meant to be a one-off product. It is one of 7 books, and it was the 4th book, I think, that I wrote. And so if you pull that book out and you don't take the whole body of work, then there's a lot of misconceptions, I believe, that don't really get filled in. People take it and it gets used in a lot of ways that I'm not comfortable with because people have only read that and they haven't read Burn Your Goals. I mean, I came out of the gate punching everybody in the face with Burn Your Goals. Yeah. John Gordon told me, I remember sitting with him in Santa Monica and his family, and he said, you can write about burning your goals. Do not title this book Burn Your Goals. He goes, nobody's going to read it. Yeah. Nobody's going to buy it. Like, everybody talks about goal setting. And I was like, listen, I love you, but this is what I got to do. I'm tired of the BS that's out there with goals and goal setting. And so I came out of the gate with Burn Your Goals. And then the second book was called An Impractical Guide to Becoming a Transformational Leader. And so if you don't kind of take some of that body of work and that foundation, it's tough. And then Pound the Stone is my favorite book, which I wrote kind of in response to Chop Wood Carry Water, that really dives so much deeper into heart posture and really dealing with identity and things like that. And then now we're going to write a book that's going to be a sequel to, an actual sequel to Chop Wood Carry Water, where Akira Sensei is on his deathbed, and he's actually going to talk about some of the ways that chop wood gets used that he doesn't agree with, and that it's getting used in ways that kind of a lot of overachievers, especially that are in leadership positions, love to take that book and beat people over the head with it. This is what you need to be doing. And it's like, man, have you read? We changed the title to Transformational Leadership, but like, have you read that book? Because if you read that book, then you would know how to actually use this in ways that are beneficial and constructive. But a lot of times, you make a tool and you can't control how that tool gets used. And I think that some people have taken that tool that can be helpful, and they've used it in ways that can be destructive for other humans. And so, it's this really interesting relationship. Even whenever Chopwood started to go viral, all of a sudden, I started to, over the next couple of years, I started to kind of spiral internally with a lot of mental health stuff that I had struggled with my whole life. And I pulled my baby brother out of the pool whenever I was 9 years old. He drowned, ended up passing away 30 days later. I lost 2 coaches to prison. I lost my dad to cancer whenever I was 21. And so I've struggled with suicidal ideation. I've struggled with manic depression. I found out at 33 that I was on the autism spectrum. And so I've had all of these things that I was dealing with, and all of a sudden Chop Wood goes viral. It's a self-published book. I don't need to work for the rest of my life, and I'm going to be able to live financially, comfortably, and all of a sudden all these new challenges come into my life. Because I'm great at, my memoir is called Hustle. The people at the top of the mountain didn't fall there. I'm great at climbing mountains. You put a mountain in front of me, and I will kick, claw, scratch my way to the top of that mountain. But when I actually, all of a sudden, just was able to sit still, and it was like, oh shit, I got a lot of stuff that I got to deal with, and that's really hard. So I have this very kind of love, hate, and a lot of other emotions with that book.
Well, I appreciate you sharing that, because I think behind every man there's a story. You know what I'm saying? I appreciate you sharing that, because there's a lot that went in, to your literary career before Chop Wood Carry Water. Everybody talks about Psalm 23, right? Oh, the Lord is my shepherd. Yeah. But we forget that there were 22 other Psalms that were in the works, that were transformational before we got to Psalm 23. Yeah. And so I really appreciate that insight. And this segues perfectly, because, right now we hear this word performance a lot, right? My company's called All Things Performance. We have elite performance mini camps here. We got performance here, performance golf training here, right? Performance is it's thrown around, it's diluted, and when you look at its the definition, it's the execution of a task or a function, right? Whether that's a human being, whether that is an animal, how an animal is performing, whether it's a piece of machinery, right? What are your insights in terms of, you've worked with a lot of athletes, you've worked with a lot of business people, you've worked with many individuals. When it comes to peak performance, being your best self, what would you say are some bullet point items that individuals need to have, and maybe some bullet point items, if you will, that they need to get rid of?
That's a good question. The first thing I'll say is, you talked about Psalm 23. My favorite one along those lines is Jeremiah 29:11, which everybody loves to quote. For I know the plans I have for you, says the Lord, for plans for prosper and future and hope and all of that. And they skip right over the very verse right before that says, after 70 years in the desert, then I have that. And so we struggle with patience, we struggle with timing, we struggle with wanting to play many gods in our own life, and especially if we live in a Western culture where we tend to read and view the Bible through our Western lens and not through the lens that I think that it's actually meant to be viewed through. When it comes to performance is another one that I kind of have a very interesting relationship with, because there's so many things that we can do to impact performance and to get closer to peak performance. The issue is that if that's what our focus is, it can cause a lot of identity issues that mask what's really going on at a heart level, at a level of like, what's going to matter on my deathbed. And on my deathbed, I had the privilege of working with Anson Dorrance, who was probably the greatest performing coach of all time. I think he's at 22 national championships that he's won coaching UNC women's soccer. And I asked a question to him in a group setting one time, that is, on your deathbed, what do you want to be remembered for? And I looked over at him and I was like, do you want to be remembered for winning 22 national championships? And he's like, no. And so it's this weird thing that, like, I think a lot of times when we when we break down performance to its essence, we've started to believe this lie that we're actually a human doing and we're not a human being. And what I mean by that is that we believe that if we're able to perform, that it will somehow give us this transformation of being, that somehow we'll be worthy of love, we'll be worthy of attention, we'll be worthy of, we'll be enough. That if I could just get to this place, then finally I'll be enough. I'll probably get a little emotional and I apologize, but
no, don't apologize.
I saw Simone Biles' quote the other day, and she said, I'm really grateful for the outpouring of love and support that I've received, because up until this point in my life, I felt like, basically, I don't want to mix up her words and I'm probably going to get it a little bit wrong, but basically that my entire worth was wrapped up in gymnastics and that I had to perform to be loved.
Yes.
And I just don't believe that that's the way that life was actually intended to be. That then we just become these robots. And there's a lot of people out there, there's a lot of people that know a ton more than I know about performance, and they oftentimes try and turn human beings into these performance robots. And I don't know, I just question, like, and again, based off of my experience with losing my baby brother at 9 and losing my dad at 21, like, at the end of our life, like, what is really gonna matter? And is winning a Super Bowl or winning a gold medal? I mean, Naira Fields is like my little sister. She played at UCLA whenever I was the director of mental training there for women's basketball, and she played for Team Canada. And the big deal with Team Canada in basketball is beating the United States, right? Like,
yeah,
the United States is the juggernaut. And so multiple times while I was there with her, they came in second. And she would always come back and she would be so frustrated and so upset. And I was like, Nye, winning gold is not gonna do anything for you. Whatever you think it's gonna do, it can't do. C.S. Lewis has a quote that's something along the lines of, you can never get enough of what you don't truly need. And so it was either a junior or senior year, she came back from summer and they won gold. And I was like, so what's up? And she was like, you were right.
You're right.
And I was like, I know. Michael Phelps struggled with suicidal ideation after winning more gold medals than anybody else. You see so many times, like, we just believe this lie that if I can just get somewhere higher on this performance ladder, that once I get there, things will be different. Yeah. But then we just keep moving the needle. And we keep moving the goalpost. We just keep moving the goalpost further and further, because we get there and then we're like, oh, well, maybe it's somewhere further up. Like, it's got to, like, somewhere. Once I get there, then I'll feel like I'm enough. Then I'll feel like, and so we kind of become these performance addicts. And, I know where mine comes from. It comes from having a father where nothing was ever good enough. And so, sure, I'm really good at performance. I really struggle with being a human being and believing that I'm enough.
Yeah.
And it just, the more that we perform, the more that we feel like we have to perform, or else, like Simone said, then what am I if that thing is gone? And so that, the thing I always love to ask people, what would happen? Who would you be if that thing that you do was taken away from you?
Yeah.
Who are you then? And a lot of times that it completely disrupts people's life. I mean, they have an identity crisis. That's whenever all, the shit hits the fan, because it's easy when you can just go out and do. And some of us are just wired better for performance. But what happens when you go out and you actually get to the top, or what you thought was the top, and then it isn't enough and you still feel the exact same way? Or what if you feel worse because you believe that lie that if I could get somewhere higher on the ladder, it would change things? But it can't, because it's just, that's more of like a transformation of circumstances. It's not actually a transformation of being. And until we have more of that transformation of being, which is what I think we really want, but I don't think that can actually come through performance.
Yeah. No, I love your take on this, a human being versus a human doing. And you've worked with tons of athletes. So many athletes get caught up, right, in what they do as opposed to who they are. And you talked about, the things in your heart that you had to deal with, and this kind of perfectly leads into the last few questions here that I had for you. I mean, we're in an Olympic year, and you already talked about Simone Biles, and there is this spotlight on mental health, mental toughness, mental skills, the mind, more so than we've ever seen in the course of human history. And in terms of your contributions and insights, you've done a tremendous job in explaining and walking us through, some of these elements. I believe, when you start looking at psychology, right, the science of the mind, the study of the mind, in my opinion, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, some of the greatest contributors to psychology are not even psychologists, man. You know what I mean? You start looking at people like Mother Teresa. You look at somebody as controversial as Muhammad Ali, Mike Tyson. Yeah, I said it. Mike Tyson. You start looking at, business people like, Peter Drucker, and how he looked at the mind. Malcolm Gladwell. The work that you're doing. Joshua Medcalf, the work that you are doing, that's literally impacting people across the world. And my question to you is, for these deeper insights, right? For these deeper insights, where should we look, right? If I need help, if I am an athlete and I'm looking for the answer, and those that are blessed to work with you, it's awesome. But if I'm listening to this today, and I need help, and I want to know the truth, and I want to be a better person, I want to be a human being, but I still want to be a high-level performer, where is the first place that I look? Because I have so many options. I have so many people telling me to do this. I have people telling me to calm down and to breathe. I have people telling me to be stoic and to be neutral. Don't show any emotion, right? I have people telling me, you got to be hype. You got to go into it. What is the answer, dude? Where should we look for insights?
Yeah, I mean, I think we both have kind of already alluded to this. I think the foundational answer will always be Jesus. And I think that outside of that, it's a lot of stuff that's not going to really hold weight. And that's challenging. I've had a lot of people that have kind of come to me and they're like, well, how can you say that your value comes from who you are and not from what you do? And I'm like, well, the only way that statement can be true is if the person that created you made you in his image and loves you unconditionally and gave his life for you. That's the only way that statement can actually be true. But to kind of, go back to the Olympic year that we're in, there's a couple things that I find interesting. Number one, the way the media wrote about Simone Biles struggles was, and I try and be really intentional with my words, and this is a heavy statement, but it is complete fucking bullshit. Because the way everybody put it is that she's dealing with mental health, and this is mental health, and this is, and so then all of a sudden, I was just in North Carolina yesterday, and was playing golf with a buddy that has coached at really high levels. His wife is one of the best female golfers of all time. And he said, he was like, when I first heard that, my gut reaction was, whoa, she's being soft. And he said, but then I found out that she was struggling with this thing, I think it's called twisties, where she gets caught up in the air and she doesn't know where she's at. And that's not fucking mental health. That is life or death. She could kill herself. She could be paralyzed. It's not mental health. She's not dealing with anxiety. She's not dealing with suicidal ideation. It's not mental health. And the media has a responsibility to articulate things in a way that is accurate. And to call that mental health, that's not mental health. What Kevin Love was going through in battles, that's called mental health. If you get twisties, that's something completely different that needs to, we need to operate with linguistic intentionality. Words matter. There's power of life and death in the tongue. Words matter. So there's a responsibility to articulate something in a way that actually is factually accurate. Facts actually matter in this world. And there's some people that have, kind of come up with this thing of, you got to speak your truth. No, there is capital T truth. There are facts. There are some things that are black and white. And so there's a responsibility there. That's not mental health. That's something completely different. And they try to portray her in a very negative light, as if she was being soft. And that's not the case at all. If you get the yips in golf, which happens all the time. If you get the yips in baseball, you've worked with people in baseball, you can keep working through that. You can keep trying, but it's real. We've seen it happen all the time. But you're not going to break your neck from the yips in golf. You're not going to break your neck because you can't throw a baseball in the strike zone anymore. But in gymnastics, you can kill yourself. And that's one thing. On another note about the Olympics, one thing that's so fascinating, we oftentimes, again, we think that life is about, circumstances and where we're at, but so much of life has nothing to do with where we're at, and it has everything to do with perspective. And so there was a study that showed that the people that win the gold usually are the most excited, happy. But then the most fascinating thing is that you would think that it would just go gold, silver, bronze, but that's not at all how it works, because silver's perspective is looking up and going, I was this close to being a world champion. I was this close to winning. Whereas bronze is whew, I made it on the podium. I could have been down there. I could have not podiumed. I could have not made it here. And so much of life is not actually about where we're at. It's about where we're looking and where our perspective is. And so that's one of the other big things I think with the Olympics is the more that you kind of, if you do go to performance, the more that you focus on, I have to do this, this, the more that you try and squeeze, it's like water, try and hold water by squeezing it in your hand. Tell me how that works. It's this very, very delicate process of I got to hold this very lightly. I need to have a heart posture of gratitude for actually being here, but not just being here, a heart posture of gratitude that my body works. Why do we have to break our leg to remember we get to practice, that we get to move, that we get to use our arms and legs? Why do we have to get in a car wreck and become paralyzed to be like, whoa, I was missing this whole thing. That I had the opportunity to go out and play. I had the opportunity to go out and do what I do. And then lastly, you talked about mental toughness, and you know my thoughts on this. I think that there's so much misinformation around mental toughness, and so many people define mental toughness as, the ability to play through a broken leg, or this guy won an Olympic gold in wrestling with a broken neck. Again, I gotta kind of call BS on some of that stuff, and the way that we define true mental toughness and the way I kind of coined it is having a great attitude, giving your very, very best, treating people really, really well, having unconditional gratitude regardless of your circumstances, or another way, even when your circumstances suck. Because if I focus on that which is 100% controllable, 100% controllable, then all of a sudden, whatever circumstances I find myself in, that becomes a character refining experience for me. Also, as John Wooden said, the guy that won more, basketball national championships than anyone else, I've never met someone that's described for me or told me what they can do better than they're giving their best. There's just certain things that are outside of our control. So rather than focusing on, these goals and these outcomes that are outside of our control, what if we just operate with this heart posture of gratitude? We surrender the outcome, we surrender the stuff that's outside of our control, and we actually focus on the stuff that's inside of our control. Because if we have a great attitude, give our very, very best, treat people really, really well, have unconditional gratitude, that is such a high standard. It's not like we're lowering the bar. We're actually raising the bar, but we're doing it in ways that are controllable versus doing it around stuff that we have no control over. So if I focus on these outcomes, these arbitrary based outcomes that I have no control over, I'm going to make myself miserable, and I'll make everybody else miserable in the process.
Yeah.
So who doesn't want somebody on their team that embodies the characteristics of true mental toughness? Whether that's a spouse, whether that's a friend, whether that's a colleague, whether that's your boss, whether that's a coach. Everybody wants people on their team that embody those characteristics. So what if instead of focusing on these arbitrary outcome-based goals that we can't control, we just focus on true mental toughness?
Yeah.
Because then all of a sudden, no matter where I end up, no matter what I place, no matter if I finish dead last or if I finish first, then I have used my sport or the thing that I do to become more the type of person that I want to become, because otherwise sports are a zero-sum game.
Yeah.
But if I am intentional about focusing on what truly matters instead of what doesn't matter and won't matter on my deathbed, then all of a sudden I'm in a position that I actually want to be in.
Yeah. No, that's good, man. It's a different take on it, for sure. It's one of those things where, like you said, man, many people define mental toughness different ways, but any definition that you look at, there's always this presence of a stressor. There's always this presence of adversity that one must overcome to become mentally tough. And what you've just shared with us is huge, because these are things that you can do regardless of what domain you practice or that you're in, or profession or whatever, and ultimately just helps us become better people. All right, and I would definitely want people like that on my team. Right. And so, no, that's awesome. Again, Joshua, thank you so much, man, for taking the time. I have one last question for you, and this is something that is that lines your work, man, and you talk about it a lot. You actually alluded to it today here more than once. I've heard it once said that it's hard to be grateful, right, and thankful, and be mad at the same time. Right? It's hard to be thankful for something, to be grateful for something, and then be mad or angry at the same time. And you always talk about this, a heart posture of gratitude. You talk about that incessantly through your work. And what I want to do today is, as we close, I want you to share with us what that means, having a heart posture of gratitude. And I also want you to share with us how we can do that. What are the steps, if it's an ABC or 1, 2, 3, just share that with us today.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's one of the, I'll never forget, I was listening to David Roos speak one time in LA, and when he said that word, heart posture, I was like, yo, that's it. Like, that's the missing thing, because so many times we focus on the external behaviors, but we've all met people that they can do all the right things, they can say all the right things, but you can just feel that their heart posture isn't authentic, that it's not actually a heart posture, it's a strategy. And until you actually have an authentic heart posture shift, and not just try and pick up a new strategy to perform, it's never really gonna happen. I think that there's a lot of different things that can impact that heart posture. Sadly, most of the time it comes through incredible adversity. Whether it's like I said, you break your leg and all of a sudden you hated going to practice, you hated working out, you just wanted to perform, you just wanted to play games, and then you break your leg and it's like, oh man, like I would give anything to be back out there. And then that first couple of weeks, it's like, man, I can run again, I can walk again, I can it creates that heart posture for you. And so, one of the things that I've tried to incorporate as much as possible in my life, I'm not as good about it as I used to be, but I just call it gratefulness, prayer, and meditation. And so the way I used to start almost every single day is I'd sit down in the shower and I would just thank God for all the little things in my life: clean drinking water, the ability to walk, talk, feed myself, 3 things that my brother that has cerebral palsy can't do. All these little things. If something on my body hurts, I would actually thank God for that thing, because 99% of the time that thing works flawlessly and I never think about it. And so rather than having this heart posture of treating God kind of like a genie, of like, God, give me this, I want this, I need this, please help me to be blessed, please help me to win, please help me to blah 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 blah. Just thanking God and creating that time and space and orienting my heart around this posture of gratitude for whatever it is that's going on in my life, instead of, again, playing this mini God, trying to control everything, thinking that I know better, when most of the time I've got a pea brain. I'm like a little kid that wants dessert before dinner, and I don't know what's best for my life. I never will. What I want and what I need, it's a crapshoot, and I think it always will be. So my job isn't to know that, understand that. It's to try and orient my heart around, thank you for what I have. Thank you for this opportunity. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you for breath. Thank you for life. And just doing that more and more. I mean, maybe it comes down to, why some people don't like my stuff is because it's messy. And I'm never going to give people a formula. I don't think there is a formula. If there was a formula, I think Jesus would have given it to us in the New Testament. It's why a lot of the Pharisees didn't like Jesus, because they liked the Old Testament. They liked the 10 Commandments. They liked the formulas. And Jesus came in and said, hey, guess what? Surprise! I gave y'all like 6,000 years and nobody got it right. So we're going to go with this new strategy, which is we're going to throw out that entire old covenant, and it's all going to depend on my life and what I've done, and you trusting me and you surrendering to me. And we don't like that because it's messy. We don't understand love and grace. We want it to fit into our nice, neat little boxes. And in my opinion, that's just not how life actually works. And So yeah, I don't think there's a formula. You can write out, in the morning, 10 things you're grateful for. There's lots of different ways of trying to orient your heart posture around gratitude instead of performance, instead of control. But ultimately, it's, I think, just in whatever way it is that you best do that for yourself, figuring out, okay, what actually is my heart posture around this? And most of the time, I think it was also Jeremiah in the Bible that said, the heart is desperately wicked, who can know it? And so I think that it's constantly trying to go back to, okay, how can I create time and space to have more of this heart posture of gratitude?
Yeah, that's good. I mean, stuff starts getting real when you start becoming real and looking yourself in the mirror. Yeah. And, like you just said, when we start figuring out, hey, what is my heart posture? Yeah. I love what you said earlier about, hey, if it's not right, if you don't have the correct heart posture, you can start to sniff that out real quick, and not only ourselves, but in others, because it becomes strategy. Yeah. Like, what does this person want? What do you want? I'm like, no, I'm just being real. I'm just being me. Oh, okay. Oh, yeah. And you know how it is. Our brains are taking in so much information, even on a subconscious level, that we can figure out real quick if somebody is just trying to strategize or if somebody really truly loves and somebody truly cares. So, man, I thank you so much for your time, Joshua. This was awesome. I need to go back and listen to some of this stuff again. You know what I'm saying? It made me want to pause at moments and just say, man, I need to reflect on this myself. It pissed me off in other moments in terms of some of the things that I'm passionate about and some things that you shared in terms of, current events. And it's just, at the end of the day, man, there was so much insight that you shared. So we just want to say thank you again, man. God bless you,
don't get it twisted, because I just told a friend yesterday, I said one of the most convicting things in my life is when I go back and I reread the stuff that I've written. It's easy to write about it. It's easy for me to talk about it. I'm gifted at that. It's really, really hard for me to live it on a daily basis. So I'm right there with you, man.
Yeah, no, that's real, man. And I appreciate it. And the fact that you admitted that makes what you shared today and who you are as a person even that much more authentic, man. And so I say thank you, brother.
Thank you for having me.
All right, man.